All right, so let's go back to the application and I'm gonna scroll to the left. So if you don't want this on one line, feel free to put it on a no line, but I'm just gonna keep it like this because I don't want to have it on a no line. Let's go ahead and copy the ping again and I'm gonna scroll all the way to the bottom and put the delete there, paste. We're gonna call this delete server. So delete server, and we already know we only need the server ID, but you can put in the whole server here as well. So I'm gonna pass in the whole server because we're gonna need to use some other information on that server as well. But all we need to delete a server, at least from a backend perspective, is the server ID. And we can call the service again. This time we're gonna call the delete, so delete, and we're gonna pass it the server ID. You can see it's expecting the server ID. So we're gonna say server.id, and I'm gonna delete this line because we don't need this. We're not doing this. Delete down there as well. So we're gonna return this line with the existing data while we make the HTTP call. All the errors, all this stuff is gonna be the same, but when we get the response, we're gonna do something else. So I'm gonna delete all these lines again, and we're gonna start anew. So what we want to do when we get the response is to just remove that server from our list and then return the new list, which is gonna be pretty easy. So I'm gonna copy this line of code. Actually, let me type it out so you guys can understand what I'm doing here, because at this point, I'm assuming you're familiar with most of the JavaScript array functions or methods. So that should be pretty easy for you. So we're gonna say, hey, give me all the data. So we're gonna say the data subject again, and then we're gonna push a new object onto this data. So what we're going to do this time is we're gonna do something similar. So we're gonna say, all right, first of all, give me everything that you got from the response. So we're gonna spread all the response data. Now we have all the metadata, all the timestamp, all the new message, everything in the response, we're returning it. Now we need to update the servers again. So to do this, we're gonna access the data property because that's where the servers are. So we're gonna say, okay, for my data, all right, which is where all the servers are, which is an object, so open and close curly braces. What we want to do is to override the servers. So servers is what we're overriding, so the list that we're showing. So what we're going to do is to just say, give me this, that data subject, that value, and the data, and access all the servers because it's an array. And we're just gonna filter them. So we're gonna call the filter method, all right? And I can actually put this on a new line. So I'm gonna put this whole thing on no line. So remember, this is all for the data, and for the filter, we're gonna have to call a callback function. So open and close parentheses, and we're gonna say for every server that we're gonna loop through, because when we call the filter, it's gonna loop over every element in the array. And let's call the server, we already have a server defined, so that's gonna give us an error because we have server defined here. So that's gonna be a name collision. So let's say for every server S, right, we're gonna execute some piece of code. So error function, we're gonna say filter this if the server.id is different from the server that the user is trying to delete. So we're gonna say server, so the server in the method.id. And when we filter this, it's gonna look at this condition. It's gonna loop through every single server. So remember, this is an array, like a JavaScript array. It's gonna loop through every element in that array. It's gonna remove the element from the array if this condition is met. Otherwise, it's gonna keep it. So we're gonna say, okay, loop through the first one. Does it meet this condition? No, keep it in the array. Second one, does it meet this condition? No, keep it in the array. And then once it finds the one that meets this condition, then it's gonna remove it, and then our server list will be filtered, and it's not gonna have this server that we just removed from the list or from the array. And that's pretty much all we have to do. We just filter the array, remove this one that we just deleted, and then return it again to the front end. And that's what we're doing here because we're calling next. So we're passing in a new piece of data, and then to access this data, we call the value. So now we just have to call this delete on the UI. So I'm gonna copy this, go back to the UI again. And this time we need to go to our table. So scroll to the left, scroll up, and this is our table. As you can see, we have our table here, and we need this right there. Or we have to listen on a click event. So we're gonna say listen for a click event on this anchor tag. And what we want to execute is our function. So we're gonna say call this function and pass the server. Remember, we're still iterating. So if I scroll up a little bit, you can see that this ng4 in the table body right there. So we're looping over all the servers. So you can see this table body, it encapsulates this anchor tag, which means for every iteration, we're gonna have this same code for every single server that we have. So this server is the local variable name that we define up here. So it's gonna be the server in the current iteration. So we're gonna pass it here. So now we can go ahead and test it in the UI. So let's go back and let's delete this dummy data that we put in here. So delete that one, it's deleted, and then we get the response back, server deleted. And remember, when we delete the server, we get this deleted true, which we can use in the front end. I mean, this is really up to you. Like, you can return whatever you want on a successful response. As you can see, this is going smoothly. And that's because I set my backend the way that I want to work with it in the front end. And that's why it's so smooth, because I know what I want it to do. Which means that at some point, even before I started doing any of the coding or anything, I thought about my design. So I might have a course later on design or a tutorial on design, like how to think about designing things and bring applications to life. But that's something you can be on the lookout for. But you have to understand that the backend needs to talk to the front end, and you have to make sure that you can do this in the easiest and the most efficient way possible. And I'm also going to remove that first one as well. So click on delete. And you can see that it's deleted, so server deleted. Now we have to go ahead and work on this report. So whenever we click print report, we want to print this table that we have here with all this information. And this is going to be pretty easy. This is really going to be just JavaScript and HTML and accessing element, and then make this work. So if you know how to do this in JavaScript, it's pretty much going to be the same thing, even though we're in Angular, because it's just still a JavaScript that we're using. So let's go ahead and work on that.